Hi everyone, Vince with Boomer Electronics here. Hope you're all having a great day. Today I'm going to be going over how to install the HISPEEDIDO screen mod for Sega Game Gear. This is a VA1 model Game Gear. I plan on doing a tutorial for a VA0 model once I get one of those to modify. And the kit I used also has HDMI output. If your kit doesn't have HDMI output, you can just skip that section of the video. If you're interested in getting this done for one of your Game Gears, you can go to my website, boomerelectronics.com. I'll have a link in the description where I offer this service. With that said, let's get into it. So here I'm just going over all the items that came in the kit. So as you can see, there's a new glass screen protector and a micro HDMI to HDMI adapter. So I'm just opening the plastic here one-handed. Alright, and here's everything. So here's the new screen. It has the adhesive strip stuck to the back of it there. We're going to use both those. It comes with this little spacer here to help adjust the screen. It comes with some 0 ohm resistors that we're going to need to install. 200 ohm resistors, we're going to need one of those. It has an adhesive strip here that we're going to use for that spacer I mentioned. Some 10 picofarad capacitors that we're going to need to install. Just some more 0 ohm resistors. Here's the board itself. Comes with the touch sensor attached to it, as you can see here. Comes with 2 ribbon cables. We only need one of these. I'm assuming they just sent 2 just in case. And it also came with some wires. So the first thing you're going to want to do if you have the HDMI version of this kit is you're going to want to measure out approximately where you're going to need to do your cuts in the shell. I would recommend you do this before you do any work to the console, because having this board handy here is nice. Once you do all the modifications, this board isn't really going to be easily accessible for this. And if you don't have the HDMI version of this kit, you can just ignore this part. So here I'm trying to figure out where to line up the touch sensor. The only obvious place is directly above the HDMI port there, so that's where I'm going to put it. So these Game Gears, they have a coating on the shell that is conductive. So for the touch sensor, if you plan on using that, you're going to have to scratch away that coating with some sandpaper. That's why I have the little piece of sandpaper there. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do right now. Okay, so here I'm satisfied with how much of the coating I scratched away in that area. So now I'm just going to come in with some isopropyl alcohol and just clean it up a little bit. Okay, so I wanted to show here that it is conductive, so I have my multimeter in resistance mode. So here's part of it that I didn't scratch away, and you can see it's measuring 0 ohms between my probes. The part I did scratch away now is measuring open line, which is perfect. That's what we want. And yeah, you have to make sure to do this or you're going to run into issues with your touch sensor being grounded out. So yeah, just make sure you get this done. I'm just trying to find where to do my dremeling here for the HDMI port again. And after a lot of back and forth with the Dremel, the HDMI port is peeking out of that hole there adequately, so we're good to go with that portion of the install. We'll be coming back to that later on. So here's a few screenshots I created showing what components need to be removed and what they're replaced with. You can go ahead and go back and pause on those if you want to see those. So here I'm starting the install on the main board by removing components. You want to be careful with the contrast wheel over here. You don't want to burn it. So you can use hot air or a soldering iron to remove these components. The ones by the contrast wheel, I'm going to use the soldering iron for the most part because I don't want to melt that contrast wheel. So right here I'm just trying to heat up both sides of this resistor at the same time, resistor R32. I went ahead and got some solder and applied it to both sides to make the job a little easier. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that and get this removed. Yep, so that resistor came up no problem there. So I'm just going to go ahead and speed through the next few until I get to the hot air station. Okay, so here I'm going to start using the hot air station since these components are ways from that plastic. And yeah, it just makes things a bit easier. I keep my hot air station on 380 degrees Celsius, 100% airflow when I'm removing these. These two resistors over here I used the iron on just because I didn't want to do any damage to that inductor because I'm going to be holding on to that in my spare parts. Okay, now that we have those components removed, I'm going to go ahead and remove some of these through-hole components, starting with this inductor that I'm pointing at right here. So we're going to be flipping to the other side of the board and getting to that. For these, I just use a solder pump, desoldering pump, and some wick for the most part, and that gets them out. Yeah, I mean, if you have a desoldering gun, that's obviously going to make this a bit easier, but I don't really do enough through-hole components to justify that. So yeah, just take your time with them and eventually they'll come out. And so after some back and forth, I do get that first inductor out here. So now I'm going to work on taking out this transformer. Keep in mind, removing this transformer is optional. You don't need to remove this for the screen mod to work. However, it isn't going to be doing anything in the circuit. The reason I do mention it's optional because removing this can be a hassle. I do repair Game Gears quite frequently though, so I do want the part as backup, so I'm happy to take the extra time to remove this. But if you're running into issues removing it or you just don't feel like it, feel free to leave it in place. Yeah, so after going at this for a bit, I just got a bit impatient and decided to put some foil down there to protect some areas of the board from heat, and just went at this with my hot air gun. Yeah, your mileage may vary if you decide to go this route, but yeah, I just got a bit impatient. I wanted to get this transformer out of here. So the C69 capacitor dropped out there, which is fine because we're going to have to remove that anyways. And then following that, the transformer popped out. So yep, we're just going to go ahead and proceed now. Okay, we're going to have to remove the C70 capacitor as well, so I'll go ahead and do that. Just cleaning the board here with some IPA and a stiff brush, and nothing really to see. Okay, back on the other side of the board, we're going to go ahead and remove these transistors now. It's going to be much easier with those through-hole components out of the way. So I'm just heating up Q3 with some hot air here and getting it removed. Same deal with the Q4 transistor here. And then on Q6 over here, I do want to note it is pretty close to that contrast wheel I was talking about. So I'm making sure to blow the hot air directly away from that contrast wheel to avoid it melting. Just cleaning the board there with some IPA. Now we're going over to the other side of the board. Going to need to remove R24, R25, C39, and C40 over here. So just going to bring in the hot air gun and get to work on that. And then with R24 here, we are going to replace this with R30 over on the other side of the board. So I went ahead and removed that last. I'm just going to go ahead and do the replacement right now. So I made sure the solder is removed from those pads, R24 in particular there. So now I'm just going to go over here and grab R30. Okay, so we got R30, so we're just going to immediately bring this over to R24 and get this soldered down. I personally like soldering down these SMD components with the soldering iron if it's available. These aren't the smallest SMD components in the world, so it's definitely feasible to do. But, you know, if you want to use hot air, it's really your choice. I just prefer to use the soldering iron for this, though. Just add a little flux to the pads here, like so. Put the component in place, tack it down on one side, then introduce solder on both sides, like you're going to watch me do right now. Now we're going to need to remove R13, R14, R15, and R16 right here. So we're just going to come in with our hot air and get these out of the way. Okay, all the components we removed over here, we're going to be placing new components in their place, so we're going to want to make sure, in my case, since I'm using a soldering iron, I need to make sure all the pads are perfectly cleaned up here, so I'm just doing that right now, prepping them for the new components. R25 here, we're going to use one of the 200 ohm resistors from the kit. So that's what I did right here, just grabbed one and I'm soldering it in place. Then C39 and C40 right there, we are going to be using 10 picofarad capacitors that come with the kit. So I'm just grabbing those right now and I'm going to solder those in place. Okay, so just cleaning up the pads right there, and all these pads we are going to place 0 ohm resistors in place of the resistors that were there. If for some reason you don't have 0 ohm resistors, if your kit didn't come with them, you can just use a blob of solder or a jumper wire, it doesn't really matter. Now back over on the other side of the board, we need to put a 0 ohm resistor in place of R34 over here. So I'm going to go ahead and get these pads nice and cleaned up and solder that into place. And that should be the last component that we need from the kit. Now that we have all those components in place, we're going to go ahead and solder one of the ribbon cables in the place that comes with the kit. So here you see there's an arrow pointing to pin 1. We need to go to pin 9. So just count over to 9 from there and just line up and use some flux, some solder, and get this in place. Okay, so it looks like I have it nice and aligned here. So I'm just going to come in with my flux and put a generous amount here. I'm going to tin my soldering iron and tack down this portion of the ribbon in the place. Okay, so this side is nice and sturdy for now, so we can move on to the next 2 areas of the ribbon that need soldered down and get these done. Same process, add a generous amount of flux and get some solder on your iron and solder it down. I also should mention I'm using my thumb here to hold it in place. I mean, this can get pretty hot. I'm kind of used to working on stuff like this. You might want to use some kind of tool instead of using your finger, you know, safety first, but like I'm pretty used to doing this, so it doesn't really bother me. And then I'm just gonna quickly go through these pins again and just just make sure they're all soldered down properly. Rather do this once than have to come back later and redo the whole thing again. So. All right, now that we have that ribbon in place, we're going to go ahead and move to the board that came with the kit. So to kind of hold the board in place, I'm actually clipping in the ribbon that we just soldered down. This just kind of keeps the board in general place. So I'm just doing that right now. Okay, so we need to solder down buttons 1, 2, and 3 here to the corresponding points on this board. So button 1 is going to solder to the positive end of C38, button 2 is going to solder to the positive end of C37, and button 3 is going to solder to the positive end of C36. You can use the wires that come with the kit if you like. I prefer to just use my own Kynar wire that I have available. I think it's just better quality, but you should be perfectly fine to use the wires that come with the kit. So yeah, anyways, I'm just soldering the 3 connections that I just mentioned in the place right now, just cutting the wires and all that. So that's what's going on right now. Also, be sure that you're not, your wire isn't touching that big ground plane right there. That ground plane, a post from the other side of the shell, when you clamp it together, is going to be hitting there. So you don't want the shell clamping down on your wire. So I was making sure to avoid that post area right there. Okay, now that we have those wires in place, we do need to solder a jumper wire from the bottom of R23 here to that T10 point right next to it. So I'm just prepping these areas and a little solder to them. Then I'm just going to come in with a wire, trim it down to size, and solder it in place like you're going to see now. So if you have the HDMI version of this kit, you're going to need to solder a wire to the LNR pads here. If you don't have the HDMI version of this kit, this isn't going to concern you. This is for the left and right channel audio. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So the wire to the R is being soldered to the M41 test point on the other side of the board. The wire for the L is being soldered to the M42 test point on the other side of the board, as I'm doing right now. Now we're going to need to go ahead and prep the BK, SMS, and 5E test points here. So yep, just adding some flux and solder to these. So the BK wire, we're going to solder it to second pin from the top of the contrast wheel on the other side of the board, as you can see I'm doing right now. So that's where that one goes. The SMS wire, so we're going to run that downwards. Then looking at the backside of the board, as you'll see here, you're going to count. So, okay, there's 2 rows of pins here. The second pin on the top from the left is where you're going to solder this wire to. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. The board is a bit in the way when I'm doing this, so, you know, if it is for you as well, you're just going to have to make do and get in the place like I did. Okay, now we're going to do the 5-volt wire. So for power and grounds, I typically use thicker wire. It's generally good practice since the power and grounds are going to be carrying more current than the data wires. So I do have a thicker stranded wire here that I'm using, as you can see. So I'm going to get that soldered down to 1 point. Then we're going to go back down to the other side of the board on the cartridge connector again. And we're going to go to the bottom row of pins this time and do the 6th pin from the left. This is where we're going to pull the 5 volts from. Okay, so this part is not mentioned in the instructions, but I did have to do this to get my screen to work properly. You may be running into a similar issue as well if you're watching this video. So the kit pulls its ground from pins 21 and 22 here on the LCD connector pins. So pins 21 and 22 is trying to pull its ground from. However, this Game Gear is not grounded on those pins. So I was getting some very interesting things going on with my screen when I tried to use it. So after I kind of realized what was going on, I went ahead and soldered a wire from pins 21 and 22 over on the cartridge connector here. 3rd pin from the left is ground. So I went ahead and soldered a thicker wire there since it is a ground wire. And this is how I ended up getting my screen to work. We'll be coming back to this a bit later in the video. But yeah, just note, if you are running into issues, this might be why, and this is not mentioned in the instructions. I plan on emailing HISPEEDIDO about this and seeing if maybe they will add it to their instructions. But just so you know, this could be an issue. Okay, so that's all the wiring soldered and in place, all the components swapped out that we needed. So right here, all I'm doing is just testing it to make sure the motherboard's still working. I don't have the screen installed yet. I'm just trying to see if I hear sound. So yep, have it on and just testing. So as you can see there, it was booting the game still, so we didn't catastrophically destroy our Game Gear or anything. You can also test with the screen there and make sure the screen's working. I'm not really sure why I didn't there, but I didn't. Probably a good idea to test your screen there and just plug it in. So anyways, I decided to move on here. So now I need to get the old screen protector off the Game Gear. So what I do to do that is I just dump a little bit of rubbing alcohol in there, some 91% IPA, and that usually just helps it come right out. So after we do that though, we do need to clean all the old junk off of the screen here, all the old adhesive from the previous screen protector. So this can be a bit tedious, but yeah, you're just gonna have to go ahead and take your time. You want to remove as much as possible. You don't want any of this old stuff down when you're putting the new screen protector on, or you're probably gonna have issues with its seating properly. So yeah, I just went in here with some IPA, some Goo Gone, a plastic scraper, and just went to town until I got it all gone. Alright, now that I got all the old adhesive off, I'm going to go ahead and put this spacer in place. So this is supposed to sit directly on the lip down there where I'm pushing it up against, as you can see. So it doesn't seem to come with adhesive on it, so I'm just using the adhesive that came with the kit here. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in place and then put the spacer up against that lip I mentioned. Okay, so now we're going to put the adhesive for the screen in place. So this is going to just go between these little nubs that you can see and directly touching the spacer that we just put in place, more or less. I think you have to adjust it a little bit so it's not creeping into the opening there. But yeah, you'll see how I do it. So yeah, just watch. Alright, now that we have that in place and it's not blocking that opening at all, we're going to go ahead and put the screen down. So we're going to go ahead and peel away the plastic protector on it, and we're going to push the bottom of the screen up against that spacer, and yep, the screen should just go on the adhesive, be between those nubs that you'll see in your shell, and yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. Pretty simple. I'm just going fast forward through reassembling the console here. And yeah, make sure the screen ribbon cables that come through that slot in the kit board there. And this is a pretty tight fit here, putting the screen cable into its connector. So just take your time and be patient with it. You might have to try a few times before you get it in right. It's a pretty tight fit. Okay, so here I realize that this metal shield is in the way. So I'm going to just take it off for testing. And then if you want to reinstall this when you're done, you're going to have to cut those tabs off it, which I will do later. But yeah, for testing, I'm just taking it off. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and power it on here. This is before I realized we had the grounding issue that I mentioned. So it isn't doing anything right now, and I was getting a different behavior, which I'm going to show on camera. As you can see though, it was booting the games, you can tell from the audio. Here's another time when I was using it, the screen was, it didn't look very good, as you can tell. So yeah, I was just getting various strange issues with it here. I'm just showcasing it in case anyone else is running into similar problems. And then I hooked it up through HDMI, and the right side of the screen there was not displaying correctly. So if you're running into similar issues, it might be a grounding problem. So after we got that grounding issue solved, the screen works great. So I'm going to go ahead and actually show the different features on it right now. Okay, so I'm testing the touch sensor. Just hold it down and it does change the size of the screen there, so that appears to be working properly. If you push 1, 2 and start at the same time, it brings up a menu. So 1 and 2 will adjust the options in the menu, so you can adjust the brightness manually there if you want. If you push start, it goes to the next option, so then you can adjust the color mode setting there. Go to pixel effect, use 1 and 2 to adjust that to your liking. And then there's more options here. So panel ratios, the different sizes you see there. So you can adjust that manually as well. Then probably the most important part here is the H position and V position, horizontal and vertical position. So if your screen isn't installed perfectly centered, this is what you're going to need to adjust. This will get it nice and centered for you right here. H position's horizontal, V position's vertical. So yeah, definitely worth going into this menu and checking that out. And then you can turn the touch sensor on and on, or on or off if you want, and then you can just reset the whole kit if you want as well. And that's about it for the general basic functionality of it. Okay, now that everything's tested and looks like it's working well, I'm going to finish reassembling everything completely. So I have the new glass screen protector that came with the kit here that I'm going to install. You want to make as sure as possible that there is no debris on your screen before you install this. If you have a can of compressed air, now would be a good time to use it. If you've installed a one of those screen protectors for a phone, it's kind of a similar idea. You don't want any dust or debris on your screen when you're installing this thing, especially with this kit, because yeah, it's going to be very hard to get under that screen and clean anything after you put this new screen protector on. So just take your time, and yeah, you're not going to regret it if you make sure there's no debris under there. Okay, now I'm putting this touch sensor in place just above that HDMI port, like I mentioned earlier. So this was a pretty tight fit. You don't want this to be touching the HDMI port if possible, because you don't want it to short out against anything. You don't want this to be grounded, or it's probably just going to be cycling all the time. So if you need to trim it down a little bit, go ahead and do that. I was able to just get it in to where it wasn't making contact with anything, as you'll see here. And so yeah, with that done, go ahead and continue buttoning this thing up. Now we're back to this metal shield, so now is the point where I'm going to cut these 4 tabs off it. I just use a pair of flush cutters and just bend them back and forth a bunch until they eventually come off. Yep, again, I just take my time with it, and then once I get those all off, I go ahead and go in there with a bit of sandpaper and sand it down so it's not quite as sharp. And yeah, I mean, that's about all there is to it, as you'll see. So here I'm testing some of the HDMI functionality on it. So if you start it up and plug in the HDMI cable here, it does just display on my monitor, no problem. However, unplugging the cable, it will not always display on the screen. So yeah, I was just testing the touch sensor there. Touch sensor was working perfectly. And then I'm going to unplug the cable here in a moment, and you'll see that the gameplay doesn't appear back on the screen. I know it was still playing the game though, because I could still hear audio coming through the speaker. But yeah, not on the screen. I noticed if you start with the HDMI cable in with the console turned off and turn it on, it will do a better job about displaying on the screen if you unplug it. And if you go plug it back in, it goes back to the TV or monitor. If you unplug it, it'll go back to the screen. However, I did see at least one time where I did that process and it didn't go back on the screen. So in general, don't rely on that. And that's going to just about do it for this video. Overall, for the price and features, can't go wrong with it. The hard part's installing the thing because the instructions aren't clear, and hopefully this video helps with that. I would have preferred to buy some BenVen screens, but they're out of stock everywhere I looked, and I have multiple Game Gears with bad screens, so my hands were kind of tied. But after getting it and getting it installed and kind of figured out, can't go wrong. So hope you found this information helpful. If you want this done for one of your Game Gears, you can go to my website, boomerelectronics.com. I'll have a link in the description, and I'll get you set up. So take care.